The fog clung to the windows like a shroud, muffling the distant crash of waves against the Oregon coast. Inside the weathered cottage, Dominic Harper Dom, to those who no longer called, sat motionless at his scarred oak desk, the glow of his laptop casting shadows that danced like forgotten ghosts across his face. His camera, once an extension of his soul, lay dust-covered on the shelf, its lens a blind eye staring into nothing. He scrolled absently through the shelter's website, the images blurring into one another until one stopped him cold, a German shepherd curled in a concrete kennel, its fur matted and eyes hollow as abandoned wells. The silence in the room thickened, broken only by the faint tick of rain on the roof, a rhythm that echoed the unspoken ache in Dom's chest. Something in those eyes pulled at him a thread from a tapestry he didn't know existed. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the screen, unaware that this quiet moment was the first crack in the dam of his isolation. The coastal town of Eldridge huddled under a perpetual veil of fog, its narrow streets winding like veins through salt-eaten houses and a crumbling pier that jutted into the Pacific like a broken promise. Dom's cottage perched on the cliff's edge, its wooden siding warped by years of relentless mist, the air inside heavy with the scent of damp wood and stale coffee. Windows rattled in the wind, framing a world where visibility ended mere feet from the glass, as if the fog were a living entity swallowing secrets whole. On his screen, the shelter's photo revealed a stark contrast, a chain-link kennel under harsh fluorescent lights, the concrete floor slick with shadows, and the German shepherd Rune, as the listing named him, pressed against the bars, his coat a patchwork of scars like cracks in dried earth. The environment screamed desolation, mirroring Dom's inner void. The fog outside his window echoed the haze in Rune's eyes, both trapped in places where hope eroded like the pier's rotting planks. Every creak of the cottage floorboards whispered of loneliness, while the shelter's distant howls, imagined through the photo, hinted at a survival forged in isolation. Dom's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the weight of the scene pressing down, turning curiosity into an unspoken urgency. Dom's fingers hovered over the mouse, trembling like leaves in the coastal wind as he clicked through the endless grid of shelter listings, each face a blur of desperation he couldn't afford to feel. The fog pressed against the glass, but it was the fog inside him that suffocated a numbness born from years of framing the world through a lens to keep it at arm's length. Why now, he thought, the words echoing in the hollow chamber of his mind, where memories of childhood flickered like faulty film reels. His mother's distant laughter, the sharp scent of Rick's cologne invading their home, those uncle visits that left bruises on the air. He wasn't ready for this, for any of it. The loss that had stolen his drive, turning his camera into a relic, his days into a monotonous loop of avoidance. But then Rune's image loaded again, those eyes sunk deep into sockets, like craters on a forsaken moon, reflecting a pain so raw it sliced through Dom's defenses. He stared, breath caught, feeling the first crack in his armored heart. It wasn't pity, not yet, but a mirror held up to his own emptiness, forcing him to confront the void he'd buried under layers of silence. His hand stilled, the cursor frozen, as a quiet paralysis gripped him. Not tears, not shouts, just the subtle weight of recognition settling like sediment in his soul. He couldn't scroll past, not this time. Dom hit print, the machine whirring to life like a reluctant heartbeat, spitting out the photo of Rune onto the desk, where it landed with a soft thud. He picked it up, fingers brushing the glossy surface, and those eyes. Rune's eyes seemed to lock onto his, piercing through the paper like daggers forged in shadow, whispering of secrets long interred. A faint scratch echoed from the cottage window, scratching like claws on glass. Wind, perhaps, or the ghost of something stirring in the fog beyond. Dom's pulse quickened, an unfamiliar pull tugging at him, as if the dog's gaze held a warning etched in invisible ink, promising upheaval in the quiet ruins of his life. He set the photo down, but the sensation lingered, a subtle thread binding him to an unknown fate. The memories came in flashes, like overexposed negatives blooming in the darkroom of Dom's mind, pulling him back to the sunlit afternoons of his childhood, in that same coastal town where the air tasted of salt and promise. His mother, with her wild curls and laugh that echoed like wind chimes, would chase him through the dunes, her camera slung over her shoulder, a Leica ancient and revered, the tool that first ignited his passion for capturing the world's fleeting truths. "See the light, Dom," she'd say, her voice warm as summer sand, teaching him to frame the chaos into something eternal. But then there was Uncle Rick, not blood but close enough to stain with his two wide smiles that lingered like oil slicks on water, his hands clapping Dom's shoulder a beat too hard during those endless barbecues, his presence a shadow creeping into the frame. One night stood out blurred at the edges, raised voices slicing through the cottage walls, his mother's sobs muffled by the fog rolling in from the sea. Rick's silhouette in the doorway like a harbinger of fracture. Dom, huddled under his blankets, had clutched his toy camera, clicking imaginary shutters to drown out the storm. What betrayal had shattered that vitality? He couldn't recall the words, only the aftermath, his mother's eyes dimming like faded prints, her eventual departure into silence, leaving him with a lens that once brought joy, but now only magnified the hollows. Photography had been his anchor, a way to seize control amid the wreckage, traveling the world to document wars and wonders, each click a defiance against loss. Yet the vague guilt clung a film over his soul, turning purpose to ash. Now, in isolation, he captured nothing but the fog's indifferent drift, the past's vitality mocking his present emptiness, a man adrift in the ruins of his own undeveloped negatives. Dawn seeped through the fog like diluted ink, and Dom rose mechanically, his movements a well-worn groove in the cottage's creaking floorboards, each step echoing the numbness that had settled in his bones like sediment. Coffee first, black bitter, poured into a chipped mug that sat untouched until it cooled, a ritual devoid of comfort, just a tether to the day. He avoided the camera on the shelf, its lens cap a sealed tomb gathering dust amid stacks of unopened boxes filled with old negatives and unsent letters to ghosts. Why bother? His mind whispered, a monotonous loop of self-reproach, guilt he couldn't name, coiling like the mist outside, blurring the line between regret and resignation. The cottage itself mirrored his void walls, lined with empty frames, shadows pooling in corners like unspoken accusations, the air thick with the musty scent of stagnation. He'd scroll through his laptop, eyes glazing over emails from editors he no longer answered, the world reduced to pixels that failed to stir him. Rune's photo lingered on the screen now, a silent intruder in his routine, its hollow gaze accusing him of the same paralysis that gripped his days, frozen, disconnected, a man encased in fog, waiting for a light that might never break through. Rune's history unraveled like a frayed leash pieced together from the shelter's sparse records that Dom had demanded before signing the papers, each page a testament to survival, etched in clinical detachment. Found wandering the fog-shrouded outskirts of Eldridge 2 years prior, the German shepherd had been a ghost of muscle and bone, his coat matted with mud, and blood ribs protruding like the ribs of a shipwrecked hull against the relentless tide. The vet's notes painted a grim portrait, multiple scars crisscrossing his flanks, some old and puckered like twisted roots, burrowing under skin, others fresh welts from what looked like deliberate strikes, perhaps a chain, perhaps a boot leaving his gait stiff, a hesitant limp that spoke of pain long internalized. His eyes, those hollow orbs in the photo, held a wariness forged in betrayal. Growls rumbled low in his throat at the slightest noise, a survival instinct honed by hands that had promised care but delivered cruelty. Dom imagined the scenes as he read cinematic vignettes flashing in his mind. Rune chained in a backyard under pouring rain, the scent of wet earth mingling with fear, his barks unanswered until silence became his armor. The records hinted at more, a microchip traced to a deceased owner, a woman named Elena, whose death was ruled, suspicious whispers of a family dispute involving a man matching Rick's description, though names were redacted like censored frames in a forbidden film. In the dim confines of the cottage, Dom and Rune orbited each other like distant planets caught in the same gravitational pull, their shared silence a vast emptiness bridged only by fleeting glances and unspoken resonances. Dom moved through the space with deliberate care, unpacking boxes that stirred dust like forgotten memories, his eyes averting the old photo album, where Rick's image lurked like a specter in the periphery. Rune claimed the shadowed corner by the hearth, his body coiled tight, as a spring ears twitching at every creak of the floorboards. His growls a low rumble directed at the album's closed cover, as if sensing the poison within. Neither initiated contact. Dom left bowls of food at a safe distance, retreating to his desk where the laptop's glow illuminated his guarded face, while Rune watched with eyes like polished obsidian mistrust etched in every rigid line of his frame. The storm howled in from the Pacific like a vengeful spirit lashing rain against Dom's windshield as he gripped the steering wheel wipers, slashing futilely at the deluge that turned the coastal road into a slick black ribbon. Thunder rolled like distant artillery, shaking the car, but it was Rune's photo tucked in his jacket pocket, edges curling from the damp that propelled him forward, a silent talisman urging him through the chaos. The shelter loomed at the town's edge, a squat concrete bunker under flickering sodium lights that buzzed and popped in the wind, its chain-link fences rattling like chains in a gale. Inside, the air reeked of wet fur and disinfectant, the cacophony of barks muffled by the storm's roar. But Dom's eyes locked on the last kennel Rune pressed into the corner, his massive frame trembling not from cold, but from some deeper terror, fur plastered against scars that gleamed like lightning streaks. His eyes, wild golden flecks amid the shadows, darted wildly as another thunderclap exploded overhead, the sound vibrating through the bars like a death knell. Dom froze, heart slamming against his ribs, the visual shock of Rune's raw vulnerability cutting through his numbness like a knife through fog. The urgency pulsed in the air, electric and unforgiving, the storm's fury, mirroring the chaos awakening inside him. Rain hammered the roof, sensory overload, heightening the moment, the chill seeping through his coat, the metallic tang of fear on his tongue, as Rune lifted his head just enough to meet Dom's gaze, a desperate plea etched in every quiver. Dom stood rooted before the kennel, the storm's muffled rage outside a distant echo to the turmoil churning within his hand, hovering over the latch, like a man contemplating a leap into the abyss. Why me? His mind raced, logic barricading the gate. I'm not whole myself, fractured frames and buried guilts make me unfit a photojournalist who can't even capture his own truth, let alone mend another's. Compassion tugged like an undertow, Rune's desperate gaze boring into him, those eyes like shattered lenses reflecting a pain too familiar, stirring the dormant ache of his mother's abandonment, Rick's shadows, fear coiled tight. What if caring cracks me open, exposes the voids I've fogged over? But then a subtle shift, Rune's faint whimper barely audible over the rain's patter, a sound like a breaking wave on distant rocks piercing the internal storm. It tipped the scale, empathy overriding the barriers, a quiet surrender to the pull that whispered, perhaps in saving him you save yourself. Dom's hand shook as he scribbled his name on the adoption papers, ink smearing like blood on the rain-dampened form, the shelter volunteer's sympathetic nod lost in the storm's symphony outside. The leash felt foreign in his grip, a coiled serpent of nylon that he clipped to Rune's collar with fumbling fingers, the metal snap echoing like a gunshot in the kennel's confines. Rune's stiffened muscles rippling under scarred fur, his eyes flicking between Dom and the open gate, a portal to uncertainty, as Dom tugged gently, the act raw and unpolished, his internal voice screaming doubts even as his body moved forward. The dog followed in halting steps, paws scraping concrete slick with puddles, each movement a reluctant surrender, the rain pelting them as they crossed the threshold into the gale. It was messy. This commitment, Dom's coat soaked through Rune's flanks, heaving with wary breaths, but irreversible, a bridge burned in the downpour, the first fragile thread of trust woven amid the chaos, pulling them both from the edge. Back in the cottage, the storm's fury muted to a rhythmic drum on the roof. Dom knelt at a respectful distance, placing a bowl of kibble and water on the scarred wooden floor, the scents of damp fur and earth mingling with the faint must of old timber. Rune retreated to the shadowed corner by the hearth, his body a coiled statue of caution eyes, tracking Dom's every move like a predator assessing threat, yet he didn't flee. A silent acknowledgement of the space offered the absence of force. Dom's mind raced with whispers of doubt. What have I done? This broken thing mirroring my own fractures, but as he unpacked a blanket from a box, the old photo album tumbled out, Rick's grinning face staring up like an unearthed relic, drawing a low growl from Rune's throat that vibrated through the air like a warning tremor. In that moment their gazes met wary, unbroken, a fragile pact sealed in the quiet. Dom murmured softly, "You're safe now." A promise to them both as Rune's tense shoulders eased ever so slightly, the first tendrils of trust blooming in the shared vulnerability, the cottage's walls enclosing, not just bodies but the beginnings of healing. The days blurred into a tentative truce within the cottage's salt-worn walls, where Rune claimed his shadowed corner like a fortress of solitude, his body a rigid silhouette against the flickering hearthlight that danced like uneasy spirits. Dom moved with deliberate slowness, his footsteps muffled on the creaking floorboards, placing the food bowl at arm's length, a simple ceramic vessel filled with kibble that carried the faint, earthy scent of beef and grains, before retreating to his desk, where the laptop's glow cast long shadows mirroring the dog's guarded stance. Rune's eyes followed him, twin embers glowing in the dimness, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest whenever Dom lingered too near the sound vibrating through the air like a warning tremor from the Earth's core. It wasn't aggression born of malice Dom sensed in his quiet reflections, but a defense honed by betrayal scars hidden under fur that tensed like coiled wires, his ears flattening against his skull in silent proclamation. Approach not for trust is a blade turned inward. Dom respected the boundary, sitting with his back turned, his internal monologue a whirl of patience and doubt. Why push where both ghosts here haunting our own ruins, feeling the weight of the silence that enveloped them like the fog outside, thick and impenetrable? One fog-laced morning, as the first pale light filtered through the cottage windows like diluted hope, Dom noticed Rune's limp had worsened a hesitant drag in his step that left faint paw prints on the wooden floor, smeared with the scent of earth from the night's restless pacing. Kneeling at a safe remove, Dom soaked a cloth in warm water, tinged with antiseptic, the sharp medicinal aroma cutting through the room's musty air, and extended it slowly toward the dog's flank, where a small wound festered, red-rimmed like an unspoken grievance. Rune tensed muscles rippling under his scarred coat, a low rumble building in his throat, but he didn't retreat, his eyes locked on Dom's golden depths, reflecting a storm of wariness and something softer, a flicker of curiosity amid the pain. Dom's mind raced with gentle assurances he didn't voice, "I'm not here to hurt, just to ease the ache we both carry." His hands steady despite the internal tremor as he dabbed the wound with feather-light touches, the cloth coming away stained with the remnants of old hurts. The afternoon light slanted through the cottage window like a hesitant intruder, casting elongated shadows across the floor where the old photo album lay open, its pages yellowed like forgotten confessions. Rune, who had ventured from his corner with a newfound wariness, sniffed at the edges, his nose twitching at the faint scent of aged paper and dust, until his eyes locked on the photo of Rick, that grinning face eyes like polished stones, hiding depths of deceit. With a sudden snarl that ripped through the quiet like thunder cracking fog, Rune lunged jaws clamping on the corner of the image, tearing it with a sharp rip that echoed like fabric unraveling from a wound. Bits of glossy paper fluttered to the ground like fallen leaves in a storm, and Dom, frozen at his desk, felt a jolt surge through him, his mind fracturing into flashbacks. The childhood kitchen bathed in evening glow, his mother's voice rising in sharp protest against Rick's low, insistent murmurs, the air thick with the acrid smell of burnt dinner and unspoken accusations. As the fog parted for a rare burst of sunlight piercing the cottage like a lance through armor, Dom rose from his desk, drawn to the window, where golden rays painted the sill in warm hues, banishing the perpetual chill that had clung to the walls like regret. The light danced across the floor in shifting patterns, playful shadows flickering like forgotten joys, and Dom's gaze softened a faint smile tugging at his lips as he pressed his palm against the cool glass, feeling the sun's tentative warmth seep through. Behind him, the soft pad of paws, hesitant at first, then steadier, signaled Rune's approach. The dog, emerging from his shadowed corner ears, perked forward, nose twitching at the new scent of sun-warmed wood, mingling with the salt air wafting in through a cracked pane. Rune's eyes, once hollow voids, now gleamed with curiosity, fixed on a moth fluttering in the beam, its wings casting elongated silhouettes that darted like elusive memories across the room. Dom watched, breath held as Rune tilted his head, then pounced lightly, not with aggression but a spark of play, his massive frame leaping with surprising grace. Paws batting at the shadow, as if chasing away the darkness that had bound them both. The evening descended upon the cottage like a soft veil, the fog outside thickening into a milky shroud that muffled the world's edges, turning the distant waves into a hushed lullaby whispered through the cracks in the walls. Dom sat on the worn armchair by the hearth, the fire's embers casting a warm, flickering glow that danced across the room like tentative fingers reaching for shadows, the air heavy with the scent of burning pine and the faint earthy musk of damp fir. His mind wandered through the labyrinth of recent days, internal thoughts weaving like threads in a developing tapestry. How far we've come from growls in the corner to shared silences that feel less like voids and more like bridges. Rune's presence a constant, now no longer an intruder, but a companion in the quiet ruins of my life. The photo album lay closed on the side table, Rick's torn image buried within like a suppressed nightmare, its edges frayed as if clawed by memory itself. Dom sipped from a mug of cooling tea, the herbal steam rising in lazy curls, carrying notes of chamomile that soothed the ragged edges of his soul, his fingers absently tracing the armrest's grooves worn by years of solitary contemplation. The peace that had settled over the cottage like a fragile blanket began to fray at the edges as the fog thickened outside, rolling in from the sea like an advancing army of ghosts muffling the world in a hush that felt more ominous than serene. Rune, who had been dozing by the hearth with a newfound ease, suddenly stiffened his ears, pricking forward like radar dishes attuned to invisible frequencies, his body rising in a fluid motion that belied the scars etched into his frame. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, vibrating through the floorboards like a subterranean warning, his golden eyes fixed on the window where the mist pressed against the glass, swirling in patterns that evoked half-forgotten phantoms. Dom, stirring from his armchair with a cup of tea gone cold, felt a chill snake down his spine, his internal thoughts flickering with unease. What's got him now? Just the wind or something echoing from the past we thought buried. Rune's posture shifted to alertness, hackles rising along his spine like a ridge of thorns, his tail still and low as he barked sharply once-twice at the impenetrable fog, the sound cutting through the quiet like a knife through silk laden with primal instinct that foreshadowed unrest. The air grew charged heavy with the scent of damp earth and salt intruding through the cracks. Subtle tension coiling like a spring as Rune paced to the door, nose twitching at scents only he could detect his stillness between barks, a pregnant pause echoing the traumas they'd both glimpsed in shared glances. Dom approached cautiously, hand outstretched, but Rune's focus remained outward, sensing the threat before it materialized, a harbinger from their intertwined histories, stirring the shadows of betrayal like ripples in fog-shrouded water. The letter fluttered from the depths of an old box like an unearthed skeleton, its yellowed paper crinkling under Dom's fingers as he unfolded it in the dim cottage light, the fog outside pressing against the windows like eavesdroppers to a confession. The handwriting was his mother's, slanted, hurried, inked, with a desperation that leaped off the page warnings of a crime long silenced, a family secret involving theft and worse shadows cast by Uncle Rick's name scrawled like a curse amid pleas for caution. Dom's breath hitched the air, thickening with the musty scent of aged secrets mingling with the hearth's dying embers, his internal monologue erupting in a torrent. No, not him, Rick the Charmer, with hands that lingered too long, his voice a velvet trap in childhood memories now flooding back like a dam-burst visions of heated arguments. His mother's tears staining the kitchen table, Rick's silhouette retreating into the night with something stolen, something irreplaceable. Rune, who had been pacing restlessly, froze at the uttered name Rick spoken aloud in Dom's trembling whisper, the dog's hackles rising like a storm front, a feral snarl ripping from his throat that escalated into protective aggression. Teeth bared in gleaming ivory body lunging toward the letter as if it were the man himself. The knock at the cottage door came like a thunderclap in the fog-shrouded dusk, heavy and insistent, vibrating through the wooden frame as Dom's heart seized the letter still clutched in his white-knuckled grip, its revelations burning like acid in his mind. He approached warily, Rune at his side with hackles raised, a low growl rumbling like an engine idling for battle, the air thick with the scent of impending rain and unresolved tension. Swinging the door open revealed Rick, older now, his once charismatic face lined with the etchings of time and secrets, eyes gleaming with false warmth under the porch light's harsh glare, his coat dripping mist like a shroud. "Dominic, my boy," Rick drawled, voice smooth as oil on water, stepping forward uninvited. But Rune's recognition was instantaneous. A primal snarl erupting as the dog positioned himself between them, body taut as a bowstring teeth, flashing in a display of feral loyalty that halted Rick in his tracks. Dom's internal storm raged. "You here now, after the letter's truths, your hands in Elena's death, in my family's ruin, the encoded photo in my album, suddenly clicking like a shutter exposing lies." The confrontation ignited, words flying like sparks. Dom's accusations sharp and probing. What did you do to her, to us? Rick's denials laced with menace, his charm cracking to reveal the abuser beneath, gestures turning aggressive as he advanced, hand reaching out as if to grasp Dom's arm. The door slammed shut behind Rick like the final shutter click on a doomed exposure, leaving the cottage steeped in a silence that hummed with the aftershocks of confrontation. The air still charged with the metallic tang of fear, and the faint ozone of impending rain seeping through the cracks. Dom slumped against the wall, breath ragged, his body trembling as the adrenaline ebbed like a receding tide, revealing the raw undercurrents of regret. Why didn't I see it sooner? The letter's truths, Rick's venom, all crashing like waves on the pier of my blindness. Rune fur still bristled, but aggression fading, circled once before pressing close, his massive frame leaning into Dom's leg, with a warmth that cut through the chill, a physical anchor in the emotional maelstrom. The local archive hunkered in Eldridge's fog-veiled heart like a forgotten crypt, its brick facade crumbling under ivy tendrils that clawed at the mortar, the air inside thick with the musty perfume of decaying paper and ink, faded by time. Dom pushed through the creaking door, Rune at his heel with a leash taut as a lifeline, the dog's ears swiveling like sentinels scanning for unseen foes, his nose twitching at the sense of mildew and secrets long interred among the shelves. The encoded message in the photo, scratched faintly into the backing, revealed under a magnifying glass like a developing ghost in a dark room, pointed here, a cryptic map of coordinates and dates, tying Rick to the pier's dark history. Dom's internal thoughts racing like film through a projector. This is it. The evidence to bury him. But why does the air feel heavier, charged with warning? Rune's body language shifted, first hackles rising subtly, a low whine escaping his throat as they navigated the dim aisles. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects, casting elongated shadows that danced unnervingly on the walls. The pier jutted into the fog-choked Pacific like a skeletal finger accusing the sea, its weathered planks groaning underfoot as Dom and Rune advanced the encoded message, a faded map etched into the photo's backing, leading them to a loose board marked by coordinates that whispered of buried truths. Salt-laden wind whipped at Dom's coat, carrying the acrid scent of rotting wood and brine, the waves below crashing like thunderous applause for the drama unfolding, while Rune's ears flattened against the gale, his body low and alert, sensing the peril before it materialized. Dom's flashlight cut through the mist, illuminating rusted nails and splintered edges, his internal monologue a frantic reel. This is where it happened, Elena's fall. Rick's hand in it, the evidence hidden here to expose the murder masked as accident. A shadow detached from the fog-shrouded end of the pier. Rick, his face twisted in a mask of fury, eyes gleaming like wet stones under the dim moonlight, blocking their path with a stance that screamed finality. The pier trembled like a living thing on the brink of collapse, waves slamming against its pilings with rhythmic fury, spraying salt that stung Dom's eyes as he clutched the unearthed box, damp cardboard, yielding letters that confirmed Rick's treachery, the murder of Elena for control over hidden family fortunes, ink running like blood in the mist. Rick's face contorted in rage, blood dripping from Rune's bite, his threats escalating into a roar that rivaled the sea. That dog's mine by right. Elena's mutt, witness to it all. Hand over the box, or I'll end you both here. Dom's world narrowed to this precipice, internal storm raging. Protect him, protect us after all we've built. This bond can't shatter now. Rick's shadow, too long over my life, but no more. The decision crystallized like a perfectly exposed frame, irreversible. Dom shoved the box into his coat, stepping forward, not in retreat, but defiance, his voice steady, amid the chaos. You won't touch him, transforming tension into action as he positioned himself between Rick and Rune, a human shield against the abuser's advance. Rick charged fists swinging wild in the fog, connecting with Dom's shoulder in a jolt of pain that blurred vision, but Rune, scarred warrior loyal to the core, countered with unyielding ferocity, lunging past Dom to clamp jaws on Rick's leg, a savage twist that felled the man with a howl echoing into the night. The cottage embraced them in a hush that felt like a long-held breath finally released the fog outside, lifting in tentative wisps as if the world itself were exhaling after the storm's fury. Sunlight filtering through the windows in pale golden shafts that pooled on the floor like spilled honey. Dom lay on the threadbare couch, bandages wrapping his bruised shoulder with a stiffness that mirrored the ache in his chest, his movements minimal. A slow shift to adjust the pillow, a gentle sigh escaping his lips as he watched the dust motes dance lazily in the light, each one a tiny testament to survival. Rune rested nearby on a folded blanket, his flank wrapped in gauze that smelled faintly of antiseptic and earth, his breaths coming in soft, rhythmic rises and falls. The rise of his chest, a quiet metronome marking time's gentle passage. The silence enveloped them, not oppressive but soothing, broken only by the distant murmur of waves lapping at the shore below, a sound that wove through the air like a lullaby for the weary. Dom's mind wandered in languid streams, reflecting on the pier's chaos. The crash of boards, Rick's defeated slump. The siren's wail fading into memory, now distilled into this fragile peace where pain ebbed like the tide retreating from the sand. He reached out a hand, fingers hovering near Rune's ear without touching, the gesture suspended in the air like a promise unspoken. His internal thoughts drifting softly. We've made it through the dark, boy, and here we are, breathing in the quiet, the weight of secrets lifted like fog burning away under the sun. Rune's eyes half-opened golden slits acknowledging the presence without alarm, then closed again, his body uncoiling ever so slightly in the warmth. The cottage's walls seemed to lean in protectively, the creaks of settling timber, now comforting whispers rather than omens, the hearth's ashes cooling in gray mounds that spoke of fires burned out but ready to reignite. Time stretched in long, soft sentences of repose, minimal movements defining the space, a tail twitch from Rune Dom's slow blink against the light, signaling not just survival but a tentative return to safety. The emotional void filling with the subtle hum of shared existence wounds tended in this sanctuary of stillness. Days unfolded in the cottage like pages turning in a well-worn book, each one marked by small deliberate acts that wove the fabric of healing between Dom and Rune. The air rich with the scents of fresh bandages and brewing tea steam curling upward in lazy spirals that carried hints of chamomile and honey. Dom moved with a steady tempo, his steps measured across the creaking floorboards, placing a bowl of water near Rune's blanket, the liquid clear and cool, rippling slightly as the dog approached his tongue, lapping with a soft rhythmic splash that echoed the waves outside their reflections, merging in the surface like intertwined fates. Rune followed Dom now, not with urgency, but a quiet shadowing pause, padding in sync with Dom's gait, the sound a gentle percussion underscoring their bond, his tail swishing in slow arcs that stirred the dust into golden motes caught in the sunlight filtering through salt-frosted windows. They ate together, Dom cross-legged on the floor with a plate of simple fair bread and cheese, the crust crunching under his teeth. Crumbs falling like confetti as he offered a piece to Rune, who accepted it from his hand, with a warmth that radiated through fur and skin, the shared taste of salt and earth, binding them in sensory communion. Glances exchanged across the room became longer, more laden. Dom's eyes meeting Rune's golden ones, holding for beats that stretched like taffy, conveying volumes without words. Gratitude in the tilt of Dom's head, forgiveness in Rune's unblinking stare, their behaviors interwoven like threads in a tapestry mirroring recoveries that unfolded in parallel.